Hello and welcome to episode 15 of A Question of Property, where we answer all your questions that are property based and some other ones as well. My name is Lucia France, I'm your host, and I'm joined by our usual panel of experts. We have John Howard, property expert of, would you believe it, over 40 years experience.
I can't believe it.
I believe it.
He can't believe it either, in the industry, and author of 3 different books on the topic, and the most recent one is Buying and Selling at Auction. So yeah, you can't believe it, John. 40 years, has that gone quickly?
Where has the time gone? I've lived in my current home 28 years in August. I just can't believe where the time's gone.
Well, here we are, and there's no time like the present. We also have Stefano Lucatello, a senior partner at Cobalt Law International Property Lawyers, and our go-to for advice on buying and selling property in Europe and further afield, Stefano, as well.
Yeah. North America, South America, North Africa. Yeah, we do a few places.
Well, we have to find out about that a little bit later, because I think you're heading over there maybe later this year. And last but not least, Paul Mahoney, best-selling author, award-winning property speaker, and head of Nova Financial Group, and our much-needed straight-talking Aussie of the panel. So how are you, Paul?
Very well, thanks. Yourself?
Good. I'm very good. Nice to see you again. So, okay, let's kick off with our starter question. As you all know, Boris has announced that we can meet in groups of 6 from different households as of next Monday. So which 6 people, dead or alive, fictional or non-fictional, would you like to meet for a socially distanced barbecue in the park? So who would like to take that one first? Let's go for...
Shall I take it first?
Let's go for John, yes.
Well, being a property developer, I haven't got many friends.
Oh,
so, I know.
That's very sad.
We're not very popular. So I think I've got 3 new friends. Well, I think they're friends. So I'd have you, Lucia, there, and I'd have Paul there, because he's got to come with if you come, I suppose. And of course we definitely need Stefano to cook. So he's going to have to be there. And then that's me. That's 4. And then I think I would have Margaret Thatcher.
Right, okay.
Got to have Margaret Thatcher, haven't we? And I think I'd have the Queen, because the Queen has been around for so long. I've got so many questions to ask her, and I'm probably not going to get the opportunity to. I do watch The Crown, which is very good, on Netflix, but I've got loads of questions to ask her. So I'm not likely to get the opportunity. So unless she knights me, she could knight me for my work in the property industry, couldn't she? Sir John Howard.
She absolutely could.
Quite a nice ring to it.
I think if she's
I don't
watching...
think that's going to happen.
I
don't think she watches the show either, probably, which is rather disappointing. She might.
I'm not so sure about that, John.
You never know.
Not so sure.
You never know. So there we go.
So, Your Majesty, if you are watching, please do consider Sir John Howard as for his knighthood. Do you know what?
Could you imagine it, Lucia, if he had a knighthood? He'd have an even bigger head. And he wouldn't be able to get through his own office door.
I didn't think I had a big head at all.
My word, John.
It would be interesting. Do you know what? The Queen was actually one of my 6 as well. So we'd have to get it together as a group.
You're all very boring, you English. And I'm sure the Queen was also on Paul's list, being a good crown.
She is most definitely not.
Well, that's nice, isn't it? I'm not. In fact, I might have to disinvite you, Paul.
So Paul,
I might not come.
Might send you back on a boat, Paul.
Oh dear, right. Paul, who were yours then?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I thought, the lockdown has kind of brought family and things closer together. I think it's made family in people's minds more important, where you kind of, not that you forgot about your family previously, but we had our 9 to 5 previously, now we don't really. So I was thinking, my 2 grandfathers are dead. It'd be nice to have a lunch with them. My sister just had a little baby. I haven't got a chance to meet her yet. She's asked me to be the godfather, so it'd be nice to meet her. So I think a little family gathering would be nice.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that's much needed.
Does that mean you haven't got any friends either, Paul?
No, I don't.
It's not meant to become a slanging match, but as usual it has. Okay, Stefano, what would your 6?
Well, being Italian, I had to find a couple of Italian people. So I'd start off with that famous man Galileo Galilei, famous scientist, Leonardo da Vinci,
Of course.
I need a bit of music there, so I'd have Eric Clapton.
Eric Clapton. Bloody hell.
Madonna, because she's a bit of a scream.
She was one of mine as well.
Yeah, she's quite good. I like fashion, so I'd have Coco Chanel. And also, because she's so full of herself, I've been watching a program about her and another group of people going to India, Britt Eklund, because I think she'd be a bit of a scream.
Fantastic! What a great lineup there.
Well, yeah. What about us? How rude! How rude!
You said you've got no friends, mate. Anyway.
Unbelievable. Well, you certainly don't seem to have any either. If you got that lot.
I have intellectual friends, John.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll have to have our own one at some point.
What's your choice, Lucia? Who was your 6?
Oh, my 6 were, so Madonna was one of them. The Queen was also one of them.
God knows why. Yeah.
I would also love to see, my friend Pete passed away 3 years ago. He was my best friend. I'd love him to be there as well. I'd like Prince to be there, the singer.
Oh, I'm not coming if Prince is there.
So what am I up to? 4, and then the rest would be taken up with you guys.
Yeah, that's very kind of you.
Yeah.
You'd be breaking social distancing laws.
You'd be breaking Boris's. The only person who can break. The only person
you and George Cummings.
That law is Dominic Cummings.
So sorry, Dominic Cummings.
Who's George?
Oh, yeah.
You know that.
I went to school with a George Cummings. That's why I said it.
That was his dad.
Well, yeah, that shows my maths skills definitely haven't improved since school. So,
well, John and I'll take a shift each then.
Okay. Right then, let's move on to our proper questions then.
Go on then.
So first one here is for Paul. This person says, I'm looking at investing in the buy-to-let market. Could you advise me whether I should be looking to purchase a flat or alternatively a freehold house? What's your advice?
Okay, so that's a fairly common question. Generally, I've found when talking about this topic, people sit in one of 2 camps. And it's not necessarily what you think when asking the question. It's either they don't really care which one, or they prefer freehold houses. And I can understand that because, you know, you've got more control over the property, you actually own it. However, I suppose we tend to approach property a bit differently to how most others look at property. And that is, we try to take the emotion out of it. And rather than focusing on the asset, focusing on what we can try to achieve from investing in property. And therefore, our approach is much more about finding the best possible location based upon certain driving factors and key fundamentals, and then allowing that location to determine what the most suitable property is.
Right.
So I think a lot of people start out with saying, oh, I want an end of terrace house, and then they jump on Zoopla to find an end of terrace house. Whereas we will do a research to find the best possible location based upon the strongest driving factors that give us the most confidence in that location doing well. And then, for example, if it's a city centre location, single occupancy and dual occupancy households are the majority. And therefore, 1 or 2 bedroom apartments make the most sense in that particular type of location. Right. Whereas, of course, if it's a family oriented area, then maybe a 3-bedroom house makes the most sense. There is always, regardless of the location, there is always a skew toward a certain type of property. And therefore, that's the type of property you want to be buying. Now, based upon that, we tend to invest both personally and advise our clients to invest more so in flats, mainly because they are in more central locations. And most flats are freehold. Now, if that freehold is sufficiently long, and I'd say you probably don't want to be buying anything. If you're
Paul, you mean did you say freehold? Sorry, Paul. Did you say lease? I think you said freehold. Do you mean leasehold?
Oh, sorry. I meant leasehold.
Sorry.
So long as that leasehold is sufficiently long, and I'd say if you're buying for the long term, you wouldn't want the leasehold to be any less than 125 years.
Okay.
But quite often, new build freeholds, leaseholds, are 250 or 999 years. That's often what's referred to as a virtual freehold, because it's going to substantially outlive you and will never cause you any issues with regards to the value. The value is only really affected on a leasehold when it gets below about 80 years, because that's when you need to start considering renewing it. So both can work. A lot of people rule out flats because they're leasehold. I think that's a massive mistake. there's a huge trend toward inner city living, central living for young professionals, especially. In the past, I suppose older generations, their goal was to have the larger family home, and they were happier to live further from town to achieve that goal and travel to work. That's not the goal of young professionals anymore. And that's something that I buy into personally. I'm talking to you today from Zone 2 London. Our office is in the city and it's 10 to 15 minutes commute. I've got no interest in moving further out just to get a slightly bigger place.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Do you know what my view? Do you know what the view is I've got out my 2 dual aspect windows, Paul? I've got my parkland for one side, and I've got my stables and everything. Beautiful country, beautiful views. Yeah, you'd hate that living in a flat.
Would you consider yourself a young professional, John?
Well, I consider myself 38, which I wish I was. So the one thing I would say, Paul's absolutely right. The one thing I would say, people get hung up on the service charge, and if the service charge is too much, if you consider it too much in a flat these days, you can go, you can take control of that management if enough of you agree, and run the job yourself, or even appoint someone else to run it, or even buy the share of the freehold. So that's one thing, because my argument about flats, which is I believe a good one, is that actually if you've got a house, you're going to have to pay the insurance, the maintenance. I've just had all my house painted here, cost a bloody fortune, all these things. So at the end of the day, you're paying a service charge of sorts on your own house anyway. So, and it's probably going to be a lot more on a house that you own outright yourself than it is a flat. Because of the size of it and the fact you're not sharing those costs with a load of other people. So, if your roof goes wrong on the house that you've invested in, you've got to do the whole roof yourself. So I think the service charge does get a bad rap sometimes, and it's a bit unfair and a bit unnecessary. The other quick thing is, if you're looking on Zoopla, you're looking on the wrong place to find a deal. That's for sure. You should be talking to Paul, you should be talking to other people to find deals, not on Zoopla or Rightmove or any of these other sites.
What do you mean then, John?
Sometimes the service charges, because generally in a development, if you have services, facilities, they obviously need to be serviced, and that might increase the service charges a little bit, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Perfect example is we have a client at the moment that we found, he's actually buying a property off a previous client of ours that bought off plan 18 months ago or so. This is a development in central Manchester, and it has everything. It has a pool, a gym, a spa, a sauna, plunge pool, 24-hour concierge. Now, the service charges are a bit higher because of all of that, but the rent is substantially higher. The gross yield on this one-bedroom flat is 7.2%, compared to others in the area that are about 6%. And that extra rent more than pays, substantially more than pays for the slight extra service charges. So it's more about the net outcome rather than the internal cost.
So basically, Paul, for this person, in terms of your advice, you'd actually say it doesn't matter really whether it's freehold or leasehold. It just depends on the area and what they're looking for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. That's great. So let's move on to Stefano for our next question. We're off to France. I have a dispute in France with a neighbour over the boundary fence. Who would you suggest I get to advise me over this issue, bearing in mind that most of the time I'm based in the UK? So what's your advice on that one, Stefan?
Well, the first thing I'd do is I'd go to my notaire, the guy that completed the sale on behalf of the French government, and I'd get a set of my title deeds and a copy of the plans. I'd then go to the cadastral register, which is the equivalent of our land registry, and I'd make sure that the two were the same, and that what was registered at the land registry when you bought it was in fact what you bought, and the boundary line goes where you think it should go. And then what I'd do is I'd get us a local surveyor, someone called an expert géomètre, and get him to consider the plans, to walk the boundary and make sure that of my facts before I go anywhere else. Having done that, I would then send an amicable letter, a friendly letter, to my next door neighbour, telling him what the situation is, setting it out, and enclosing a copy of the plan, showing the boundary and whatever it is that's in dispute, and what should be done. I mean, we're not exactly clear what the dispute is.
No.
So it could very well be that he's got a huge high fence that is reducing the amount of light that's coming into his home. They don't have in France the same 45-degree rule that we have, for example, for light. So it could be that. It could be that the fence is actually misplaced. It could be that, for example, the fence has blown down and the guy's put it back, but he's put it back in the wrong place and he refuses to put it back.
Right.
So once you've done that and you get no joy out of that, then what you could do is take the matter to court. You could start a civil procedure in the court, in the local court, and then the matter would go before a judge. It would be a long-winded exercise. It would cost quite a lot of money, and the judge would then rule based on the facts that he or she's presented with. So that's the follow through of what you do. I would always urge people to meet. If you're not there, you have a problem because you don't know what the guy's doing. I would install a camera along the boundary line, if at all possible, so that it can transmit a Nest camera, something like that. I've got a client who's done that already on something else, so that you can exactly record what's going on and make sure that nothing untoward's happening in your absence.
That would be allowed then, Stefano?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just put a camera on. You just put a camera on your property, and you can record it to your phone, and you could take a live view of what's going on from, every now and then, and you could log in and see what's going on. It could ping to you if there's any movement on the boundary fence or whatever. So you could cover that. I mean, you don't need to be there nowadays with the technology that we have. But
you could just send a drone. Sorry, John, go ahead.
You can send a drone, yeah, absolutely.
I'm just saying, don't you think all this technology, you can torture yourself with it? At the end of the day, surely he needs to get over there and sit down and have a red wine or a cup of tea or something with the person and try and negotiate. It's always the best way, isn't it, to negotiate?
Well, absolutely.
I mean,
the best way to do it is to negotiate.
Best way. I mean, going down the legal route. I know you make your living out of it, Stefano, but even you don't want to deal with negative issues if you can help it, do you?
No, quite the contrary. I don't advocate litigation at all. I always advocate mediation. And in fact, in every European country and in North America now, and in most countries in the world, the procedure of mediation and dispute resolution, ADR, is it has to be done before you go to litigation. So the parties don't spend more money on people like me.
No, I think that's a good idea.
Right. And I would get the mayor involved. The other thing is I would get the mayor involved, because the mayor, especially in small areas, has a lot of swing, a lot of say, a lot of power. So that if you're in the right, go and speak to the mayor and show the mayor, because they have a lot of influence in the area, and he or she, because they're usually so full of themselves with the tricolour on the chest, they go around and have a word with them.
The other thing, am I right in saying in the UK that the height of the fence can't be more than 2 meters? Is that right?
It's only where it converges with the height from a side road into a main road. So in Yorkshire, where I live in the countryside. My road comes onto the main Hull to York Road. The guy there put a fence on, and we couldn't see the main road coming out of the side road because he'd put this privet hedge up over the years, and we all asked him to get it pulled down. He didn't, so the local authority pulled it down for him. Yes, where it converges with the highway, you can't have a 2 meter high fence.
No.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. And what do you know? What's the reason for that, Stefano? That you can't.
It's because when you come out, if you think about it, coming out into a main road, and in my case, I have to look left and right. On the right-hand side, from traffic coming from me, no problem. From the York side, I can't see what's coming. So if I go into the middle, it would mean me going to the middle of the road and waiting to see what's going on, basically. So that's why.
Yeah. Although you could get mirrors. Those.
Well, can I also say, if you're in one of those dreadful Maseratis, you're very low down, and probably the angle isn't great.
Yeah, and the nose
my
is
Maserati
quite big,
is a Quattroporte. It's a standard sports saloon, John.
Okay, let's leave it there. This is about property, guys, not about cars.
Can't we make it into cars as well? Can we have property and cars?
That would be fun, actually. That would be fun.
Let's do a program on property and cars.
Yeah.
Right. Let's go to John then for the next question.
Yes.
Oh, do we have to? He's had his say. Can't we just go to Paul again?
Well, he's got more to say about this, I'm sure.
He's always got more to say about everything.
Very Very true, very true. So, John, I have recently been offered a property with a large garden to live in myself.
Yes.
But there is an overage to be negotiated with the current owner. Please, can you firstly explain what overage is? And secondly, how I can get out of it? Because I definitely don't know what overage is. So that would be helpful for me as well.
So I'm going to pass this to Stefano in a minute because of, because it's a legal question. But basically,
you know the answer.
Yeah, basically what an overage is, it's an agreement between two parties. So they obviously feel that potentially in the future you might be able to get planning on the land at the side of the property. So if they do that, they want to share some of your uplift, some of your profit, some of your uplift.
Right.
Now, normally they limit it to a 10-year overage, 20 years or whatever. There's a time limit on it. And if you can negotiate a time limit, the lower the time limit, the better. And also the percentage, it might be that it's 50%. It's never more than 50% normally. I mean, I would try and get away with 25% of the overage. So the uplift in value. So if the land value is 10,000 as a garden and you get planning and it's 100,000, then they would share a percentage of the difference. So not when it's built, but just on what the value of the land is once it's got planning permission. But I shall pass you over to our legal beaver, Stefano.
Legal diva. I've done a few overage. I've done a few overage agreements in my lifetime.
Yeah.
It's called a clawback or uplift agreement, and it's where I have a plot of land. It's got no planning on it, but there could be planning on it. I sell it, and I retain the right when it goes to the other guy, the buyer, and he gets planning permission to get a percentage of, as John says, the uplift. So if I sell it for 100 grand, but he then goes and gets planning permission, he sells it for $1 million, then I can share in that difference, that profit. And I mean, an overage agreement is quite a complicated agreement. It needs all sorts of clauses being put in it, such as what costs are going to be deducted before the actual amount is shared, what's the trigger date, how many triggers will there be before the event happens, and which disposals of the land are permitted and not permitted within or without the overage agreement, agreement on fees, and that's the sort of thing that goes into an overage agreement. They can be very
only can I just stop you there? Only a lawyer would have to complicate it. It should be a lot simpler than that. It's the difference between what the value is now and what the value is, and you guys make it so complicated, and it could be a lot simpler. And we know why you
have to, John. You have
However,
you have to contemplate the exit strategies, because
I understand that.
In certain situations, people say, "Well,
I
that
understand
wasn't within my thoughts, and therefore it's not part of the overage agreement. I'm not going to pay you."
No, I appreciate that, but lawyers, do make it incredibly complicated when it probably doesn't need to be quite as complicated. Can I give you a quick trick I do sometimes? If I've got some land that's got no chance of getting planning on ever, I put an overage on that piece of land, bung it in an auction. And because there's an overage on it, people think they potentially might get planning on it, so you get a bit more money for it.
Is that conning people then, John?
Not at all, because if they're clever, if they're clever than me, then they may get planning permission on it. And the planning laws change all the time. So
that is true.
Not exactly.
John, is that why they call you Honest John?
Honest and ethical John.
I'm just giving you the trick. All I'm doing is giving you the tricks of the trade, the inside tricks of the trade. That's all I'm giving you.
So John, just to fully answer this question, then, how would they get out of it? They just have to negotiate.
They can. First of all, they can say no. We're not going to give you an overage. This is the price we're paying This is the price we're paying. If you don't want to accept that, we'll walk away and find another property. Or they can say, well, I tell you what, I'll give you 10%, but your lawyer draws up the overage, our lawyer, because it's going to cost money to do. And even, if you get it as complicated as you can do with some of these lawyers, it will cost quite a lot of money. So, of course, all they really do, may I just say, is press a button on a computer, prints out the overage they used last time, and then charge you a fortune for it. That's what they normally do.
Every overage is different.
It's different, you'll tell
Fundamentals
me.
which are the
That's
same.
the same old
But
rubbish
every
I hear
overage is
from
different, John.
every
I refuse
lawyer
to
I
back
talk to.
down on
Right,
that.
order, please, order. Thank you
That
very
would have
much.
nothing to do with charging per hour, would it, Stefano?
No, we charge a fixed
Exactly.
fee, actually. No, we charge a fixed fee.
Unbelievable.
We charge £1,750 for an overage.
Now who's got sharp practice? Eh?
Right.
We charge a fixed fee, not on by the hour. So whether it takes 3 hours or 10, it's the same fee.
Okay.
Okay.
Or
We'll
3
leave
minutes.
it there, shall we? Thank you, John.
Or 3
and
minutes by
Stefano.
just pressing the button on the computer, yes.
Right, back to Paul now. Paul, please, can you let's have a bit more fun. So somebody's written in and said, I saw you at an event in Olympia, and you spoke about buying a further buy-to-let property every 2 or 3 years. Can you explain, please, how that works again? So
Yeah,
maybe they weren't listening.
Well, we haven't spoken to Olympia for a while, have we? We've been on lockdown. We've missed all the events. Well, look, firstly, thanks for coming to Olympia. I hope you found it useful. So with regards to building a buy-to-let portfolio, I assume probably what I was talking about is the sort of self-perpetuating snowball effect that leveraged buy-to-let property can have. And I think the easiest way of explaining that is using an example. So let's say you take £50,000 and buy a £200,000 property. Well, essentially what you've done there is you've quadrupled your buying power, because you've turned 50 grand into 200 grand. The debt's cheap, it'll cost you 2 or 3% at the moment. It's over the long term, and it's with no ability for the lender to recall that mortgage, regardless of what happens to the value of the property. So it's quite low risk.
Yeah.
Now, therefore, by achieving relatively average returns on the asset value, the 200 grand, you can get really strong returns on your cash, being the 50 grand. And I don't want to make this two numbers heavy, but generally what we're aiming for there is between 5 to 10% net yield on the cash invested.
Right. Cool. Lost your
and
there, Paul. There we go.
Yeah, 5 to 10% net yield on the cash invested. And then if you're getting a relatively average 5% uplift in value on the asset, so the property, and the UK average for the past 20 years is 5.5%. That includes 2 recessions. So if you get 5, which is very, very achievable on an average basis over a 5 to 10 year period, that gives you 20% on your cash. Again, because you've quadrupled your money. So to put that another way, a £10,000 uplift on a 200 grand property is 5%. 10 grand on your 50 grand investment is 20%. So you put those two figures together, you're at 25 to 30% per annum. Now, I'm yet to hear a logical argument that says that's a bad return. It's not. It's a very good return for cash invested in a passive investment. Therefore, you're essentially, if you're able to do that 25 to 30% a year, you will get your initial investment back every 3 to 4 years. So that 50 grand, through cash flow and capital growth in the asset, you'll be able to take that back and buy another property.
Right.
Therefore, you start off with one in 3 or 4 years without investing any further money and without doing very much either. If you invest in a decent property in a decent area, start out with one. After 3 or 4 years, you've got 2. After 6 to 8 years, you've got 4. After 12 to 16 years, you've got 8. So that's what's often referred to as the snowball effect. And that's without, obviously, if you're investing more money along the way, you can build that a lot quicker.
Yeah.
But that's really the beauty of leveraged property. If you're buying in good areas with the right driving factors, it can very much be self-perpetuating, that it actually creates wealth itself through the uplift in value, assuming that you're happy to reinvest the net cash flow. That helps as well, because it brings down the debt as the value increases and increases the equity. So that's more than likely what I was referring to in that talk at Olympia, is how people can build a portfolio. Now, that might seem like a slow burn. So, having 8 properties in 12 to 16 years, but keep in mind, you're only investing £50,000 in one property to start with. If you're buying an extra one every year with extra cash, that builds a lot more quickly. And it has a multiplying effect on how quickly you can build the equity and how quickly you can build the passive income.
Can I just ask something, Paul? So if I come to you and I say I've got my mum's given me 200 grand, what would you do with that 200 grand to start my portfolio off?
Well, it would depend on your situation, your goals,
Spend $1 million.
Stage of life. You know, if you were, for example, Stefano, a first-time investor, the criteria might be quite different to if you're retiring tomorrow. You know, likely would be quite different, because you would, if that 200 grand is all you've got, you need to focus on growing it to, you know, quite like what John mentioned, you'd want to turn that 200 grand into $1 million to be able to generate any sort of half decent passive income to live off at some point in the future. But if you've already got a couple of million in the bank or in investments, then what's suitable for you would be quite different. But, you know, as a high level, for our average client, I say our average client at the moment is buying properties predominantly in Birmingham, Manchester and Liverpool of an average purchase price of between £200,000 and £250,000, and therefore deposits of somewhere between £60,000 to £80,000, sort of including all costs. So you probably split that 200,000 into 2 or 3 properties,
right?
Probably across slightly different locations. So perhaps you could go for 1 property in each of those cities, for example. Maybe slightly different types of properties. So you could go for, you know, 1 bed, a 2 bed, and maybe a house. So your target markets are slightly different. Your driving factors are slightly different. But you're still in major cities with substantial catalysts for positive change. As a high level, that's kind of the type of thing that we generally do.
Great.
Can I also suggest something? Bear in mind Stefano's age and so on. I'm not being rude to you when I say that, but you could invest in my new property bond that I'm launching shortly.
So tell us about
guaranteed income. Yeah.
Thank you, honest John.
No problem.
Right, let's go over to Stefano then for your second question for today. Thanks very much, Paul. So this person says they're looking at potentially selling their apartment in Paris, but estate agents charge a lot of money. Is it possible, and am I allowed by law to just sell the flat myself? So how would that work in Paris?
Yeah, so the law in France is that when the buyer puts in an offer and it's accepted, in that offer, they usually are included estate agents' fees. That's the starting point. It's not necessarily the case. You can buy without estate agents' fees. Very if the vendor is desperate or is happy to foot the bill for the estate agents' fees. But it's usually the case that the buyer foots them, especially in Paris, where property, well, it depends which part of Paris. If it's on the peripheric area of Paris, i.e. the outer areas of Paris, then the property values are lesser than in the centre, like the boulevards in the centre. But yes, you can sell your own property, as long as it's like the same in England, anywhere else in the world, as long as you do not enter into the business of selling as an agent immobilier, that's an estate agent, and you don't profess yourself to be entering into what's called a commercial activity as an agent immobilier, then yes, you can sell your own property. Of course, they don't have the same things as we have, like Zoopla and all the other platforms that people sell on Rightmove, and there are many others. But you can sell it. People do sell their own properties. What they do is they talk to the notaires. Notaires in France can also sell properties and have done for some time. They've been supplementing their huge, anyway, income by selling properties. And more notaires are now becoming estate agents, and they don't charge as much as estate agents do per se. So you could go that way. I would say that unless you know your marketplace very well, as with anywhere else, I wouldn't be selling it on your own unless you are a whiz kid on the internet. Because if you think about it, Paris is like Rome, is like Milan. Who's going to see your property for sale? And it's not, you can't stick a for sale sign out on, that's the other point. When you live in a flat, sorry? You
can't put a for sale sign on the property, did you say?
No. Well, most properties which are flats, and most of them are in central cities, you cannot put a for sale sign on the outside of your balcony, like people have tried to do. And that's one of the reasons that it would be very difficult for you to sell the property, because only certain buildings and certain activities can put fichiers, as they're called, notice boards on the outside of their balconies. So it would reduce your opportunity to sell even more, because who would see you on the 4th floor, the 5th floor, the 7th floor of a skyscraper. So my view is that, especially in Paris, you should be able, even in these lockdown period, to sell your property for a good price. Paris is always one of those cities in France that maintains its values. People are always looking for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartment in Paris, and you should be able to sell your property, even including estate agent. Now we go to an estate agent or a notaire, because it's well worth the sale. It takes the hassle out of it. You know, okay, fine, so you don't pay the 3%, but then again, is that not worth it? Because it means you can get on with your life and let the guy do what he's good at supposedly doing. And I would do that. You know, it's like people in England, they try and sell the properties themselves, and with differing results. If you're good, I think it's good. It doesn't come down to whether you could sell a property. Nowadays it comes down to how you manipulate the internet, and can you understand the algorithms and all these things that Google puts across and whatever. So it's not being a great estate agent, it's how, if you look at Purple Bricks and all the other organizations, the United Kingdom, that do online, you know, it's not because they're good estate agents, really, it's because people manipulate the algorithms. And I don't want to
don't you think you should be asking someone the question, who is an estate agent and or who owns estate agents businesses?
Yeah. What?
Who
Sorry.
do you know on the panel like that? Oh, me.
What, in France?
No, in Britain. You're talking about UK now.
Yeah.
Purple Brick.
No. I'm saying to you, but I don't want to go into a discussion on that. What I'm saying is, when people sell, they have to be able to manipulate the internet. It's not a question of being able to sell a property.
No, you want to sell. You're absolutely right, Stefano. If you're going to sell through an estate agent, and don't sell through one that's online. Sell through a traditional estate agent.
Yeah. But I mean, estate agents in France and abroad, they have the multi-listing system. Italy.
Yeah,
France,
we
don't have that in England.
Well, we do. There is that in England, but we're certainly with Fine & Country, who we've got the license for in Norfolk. We don't take any property on if it's on with another agent. It has to be sole agency, because the money we spend, you know, the amount of time and money we invest in that property. You know, an estate agent only on average sells 45% of the properties they have on their books. So it is an expensive business.
I would go back to what I said before. My view is, if it's a flat in Paris, it should demand a good return.
No, good. Well, I think that's good advice. Yeah.
And I would, you know, and usually, as I say, Lucia, the price of the sale price always includes estate agents' fees, unless they are expressly removed.
Right. Okay.
And you can tell because it always says on the bottom of the price, there is a series of words afterwards that go after the price, and you can tell immediately if the estate agent's fees are included or not. So as the buyer, you know, you will pay for them. If you're the seller, I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Stefano. Okay, John, on to your last question then for today. Contrary to what you've said before, John, auctions appear to be very busy at the moment. But do you think it's best to wait a few months before jumping on my first property acquisition at auction?
Well, it's all a matter of opinion. And at the moment, I would agree. I'm slightly surprised, as a lot of people are, how busy the auction market is, and how busy the estate agents are, and how well the stock market's doing. Yeah. But I think it's a little bit like Red Bull. If people who drink Red Bull, I'm told, get a very quick high because it's all full of sugar. And what the government have done, they've sugared everybody. They've given these bounce back loans, they've done furlough, and it's all short-termism. And I think this short-termism will phase out over the next 3 or 4 months. And I think if you're patient, you know, if I ask most people the question, will there be more people unemployed in the next year than this year? Most people will say yes. Is there going to be more, you know, more businesses in trouble? Yes, there will be. So property is linked to employment, in my opinion. So on that basis, just sitting, waiting is hard, but it is definitely the best thing. When I was training racehorses in the last recession, I had a racing yard at home here, and it's the only qualification I've really got. I've got my MVQ3 in racehorse management. Wow. And there's a saying in racehorses, and the saying is cheap speed, which means you can get a horse that can do it for 3 furlongs, but of course, it needs to do it for 5 or 6 normally. So
Right.
it's quick for 3, but it can't keep it up for 6. And it's called cheap speed. And that's what's happening at the moment. We've got cheap speed. Don't get involved in it. Wait, be patient, and there'll be some bargains next year.
It's kind of like I had a smart car, and when I used to go from 0 to 30, it's really quick. But actually after that, it's a bit like, you know, it's a bit slower. I love smart cars, by the way. I definitely want to get another one. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Right. Thank you, John.
You have to take the handbrake off, Lucia.
What's that, Stefano?
You have to take the handbrake off.
That's very sexist.
That is, I definitely always remember to take the handbrake off.
Surely it's more sexist you thinking that was sexist, John.
Probably.
I have.
Thanks, Paul.
Probably.
Thanks, Paul. The check's in the post.
just to add a little bit to John's answer there. Obviously, buying an auction can be great, but as John often says, usually when a property's in auction, there's a problem with it. So, you know, that person said buying their first property at auction. I hope it's not their first property. Because, you know, John might disagree with me on this, but I wouldn't encourage somebody to be buying their first property at auction.
Surprisingly, I would agree with that, Paul.
Excellent. Good.
Oh my goodness. Right, we have to leave it there because everybody's agreed. Just one last question. Would you change any of your 6 people that you choose to have a barbecue with now?
I'd exclude John even more so.
Well, I didn't have any issue there anyway, so.
No, that's nice.
Right, let's leave it there.
I'll bring his racehorses instead.
I'm keeping it the same lineup. Why change a winning combination?
Absolutely. And we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. Do email us at ask@aquestionofproperty.co.uk. That's ask@aquestionofproperty.co.uk. And we'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching.